As chaos erupted around them, Joel and Ellie found themselves at the center of a frenzied standoff. The survivors, faces etched with desperation, surged forward, weapons drawn, but something in Joel's demeanor commanded attention. "We're not your enemies," he shouted, voice steady despite the fear churning inside. "We just want to survive." The tension in the air crackled, a mixture of fear and desperation palpable among the group. One man, his hands trembling on a rusty pipe, stepped forward. "You brought them here. We can't trust you." His eyes darted to the shadows, where they could hear the distant howls of the infected drawing near. Ellie, sensing the escalating danger, stepped forward beside Joel. "We don't have time for this. They're coming for all of us." Her voice held an edge of urgency that cut through the rising panic. The standoff lingered, breaths held in the heavy air, until a piercing shriek from the alleyway shattered their moment of hesitation. The first of the infected burst into view, eyes vacant, mouths agape, hunger driving them forward. Instinct took over the group, erupted into action. "Run," Joel yelled, grabbing Ellie's hand as they darted back into the shadows of the alley. The survivors, fueled by fear, followed suit, some falling behind as the infected surged toward them. The shrieks and clicks echoed through the night, a harrowing soundtrack to their desperate escape. They stumbled through the labyrinthine streets, the night lit only by the occasional flicker of a streetlight. Joel and Ellie led the way, adrenaline propelling them forward. They ducked into another building, breathless and wide-eyed, pressing against the walls as the sounds of the infected grew nearer. In the dim light of the abandoned structure, they regrouped, hearts racing. "We need to find a way out of the city," one survivor suggested, panic creeping into his voice. "There's a safe zone, maybe we can reach it before they catch up." But the uncertainty hung heavy in the air. Joel's eyes met Ellie's, a silent agreement passing between them. They had to find a way to keep moving, to survive this night. With a new sense of purpose, they pressed on, navigating through the remnants of the city. Shadows danced ominously as they passed through desolate streets, remnants of life scattered in their wake. They encountered more infected, each encounter a brutal reminder of the world that had turned against them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the outskirts of the city. The terrain began to change, shifting from concrete to overgrown grass, a glimmer of hope piercing the darkness. Just as they were about to breathe a sigh of relief, a guttural roar erupted behind them. A massive brute, swollen and grotesque with infection, barreled toward them, the ground shaking beneath its weight. "Run," Joel shouted, pushing Ellie forward. The remaining survivors scattered, fear igniting their instincts to flee. They sprinted through the underbrush, branches slashing at their arms, the brute's growls echoing in their ears. Joel could feel the heat of the beast behind him, a reminder of how close death was. Ellie's breath came in quick gasps as she kept pace, determination etched on her face. They couldn't let fear win, they had to fight for their future. As they approached a narrow ravine, Joel turned, gripping a makeshift weapon, a broken branch. With a fierce yell, he swung it at the charging brute, catching its attention momentarily. It roared in fury, redirecting its rage toward Joel. "Ellie, go," he shouted, his heart pounding as he stood his ground. Ellie hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes, but Joel's determination shone brighter. "I'll hold it off. Just keep moving." With a heart-wrenching nod, Ellie turned and ran, tears blurring her vision as she sprinted toward the distant trees, the hope of survival pushing her forward. Joel fought valiantly, dodging and weaving as the brute swung its massive arms. But he could feel his strength waning, the weight of the world bearing down on him. Just as the brute lunged again, ready to crush him, a sudden explosion echoed through the night, a flash of light followed by a deafening roar. The ground shook as the force of the blast sent the brute reeling, collapsing into the ravine. Breathing heavily, Joel looked up to see a group of armed survivors, guns raised and expressions fierce. They had come to help. "Get out of here," one shouted, motioning for Joel to escape. With a final glance toward the ravine, he sprinted after Ellie, the sounds of the city fading behind him. Eventually, they reached the edge of a forest, the trees standing like sentinels against the darkness. Ellie collapsed against a trunk, gasping for breath, tears streaming down her face. "Joel, I thought I lost you." He knelt beside her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You're not getting rid of me that easily." The warmth of their connection cut through the chill of the night, reminding them of what they were fighting for. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, they took a moment to gather their thoughts. The nightmare of the night still clung to them, but hope flickered in their hearts. They had survived together. In that quiet moment, they vowed to keep moving forward, to find a safe haven where they could rebuild and heal. They were battered and scarred, but their bond had only grown stronger in the face of darkness. The true horror lay not just in the infected, but in the fragility of hope, and they were determined to protect it, no matter the cost. In the heart of a dilapidated Seattle, the rain poured relentlessly, washing away the remnants of a once bustling city. Ellie moved through the shadows, her heart pounding in sync with the rhythmic drip of water from the crumbling structures around her. Each step echoed with memories of laughter, loss, and betrayal. The oppressive silence was shattered only by distant, mournful cries of infected, their grotesque forms lurking in the half-light. As she navigated the overgrown streets, the remnants of humanity lay strewn about like forgotten dreams, abandoned toys, shattered glass, and the haunting spectre of a world that had slipped through their fingers. Suddenly, a whisper of movement sent a shiver down her spine. She froze, gripping her knife tightly, eyes darting to the edges of her vision. The shadows shifted, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw the figure of Joel, a spectre of her past, flickering in the corner of her eye. Panic surged as she blinked, and he vanished, leaving behind a suffocating sense of dread. The memories of their time together, the bond forged in fire and heartbreak, threatened to engulf her, leaving her gasping for air. With every creak of the floorboards beneath her, the darkness seemed to pulse and breathe, alive with the pain of those who had fallen. Ellie stumbled upon an old music store, the air thick with dust and decay. A guitar lay forgotten, strings rusted, much like her hope. As she strummed a haunting chord, the sound echoed through the empty streets, a mournful lament for all that had been lost. But the melody was interrupted by the distant growls of clickers, their monstrous forms drawing closer, drawn by the remnants of life in a dead world. She dashed out, heart racing, desperation clawing at her throat. She ducked into an alley, the walls closing in like the memories she couldn't escape. Shadows loomed, twisting and warping, echoing her inner turmoil. Each infected encounter felt personal, a cruel reminder of the choices she had made and the ones that haunted her. The screams of the damned reverberated in her ears as she fought her way through the streets, each confrontation a battle, not just for survival but for the fragments of her soul that were slipping away. Blood painted the ground like a macabre canvas, a testament to the violence that consumed her world and her spirit. As night fell, the atmosphere thickened with a palpable sense of dread. She sought refuge in a crumbling building, the walls adorned with graffiti that told stories of despair. The flickering light of a single candle cast eerie shadows, revealing the faces of those who had once sought shelter here, their expressions forever frozen in fear. As she sat in silence, the weight of her choices bore down on her, visions of revenge and loss entwining like vines around her heart. Every sound outside seemed to taunt her, a reminder that safety was an illusion, and the horrors of the world were ever present. Sleep eluded her as nightmares twisted through her mind, a kaleidoscope of loss and vengeance. She dreamed of Joel, his smile turning into a grimace, his laughter transforming into a cry of anguish. The darkness closed in, the line between friend and foe blurring, and she awoke with a start, the echo of his voice lingering in the cold air. "You can't save them all." It was a reminder that in this world, salvation was a fleeting dream, and survival often came at the price of one's humanity. The next day, she ventured deeper into the heart of the city, the sun an ominous presence breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows that danced with her fears. Each corner she turned was a reminder of her past, the faces of friends lost, the betrayals that had cut deeper than any blade. As she crossed paths with the WLF, their ruthless efficiency mirrored her own desperation. She fought not just against them but against the darkness within herself, the gnawing realization that in this world, love and vengeance were often intertwined. As the days dragged on, Ellie found herself slipping deeper into a spiral of violence. Every encounter left her more fractured, a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces, unable to find a way back to the light. The infected, grotesque reminders of humanity's fall, became both her enemies and her solace, a twisted reflection of what she feared most, her own transformation. Each kill felt like a part of her fading away, replaced by a cold, unyielding resolve that threatened to consume her. In a climactic confrontation, the echoes of her past collided with the present, and the faces of those she had lost haunted her in the dim light of the abandoned theatre. The stage was set, not just for a battle of survival, but for a reckoning with her own demons. As she stood against the rising tide of her enemies, the cacophony of screams and the clash of steel filled the air, drowning out the last whispers of her conscience. In that moment, Ellie realized that the true horror lay not in the monsters she fought, but in the monster she was becoming. The line between salvation and damnation blurred, and in the ruins of a world long gone, she faced the ultimate choice to succumb to the darkness or to fight for the flickering remnants of hope that still lingered in the depths of her soul. The city's decay pressed in on Ellie as she navigated through the narrow, crumbling alleyways, her breath quickening with every rustle of the wind. The air felt electric, charged with the unshakable feeling that eyes were watching her from the shadows. She couldn't shake the memory of the child's face, twisted into a grotesque mask, as it had morphed into a clicker. That image clawed at her mind, a gnawing reminder of the innocence she had lost. As she turned a corner, the distant, distorted laughter of infected echoed in the alley, a haunting symphony that made her stomach churn. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye, a dark figure darting behind a dumpster. Heart pounding, she steadied her knife, creeping forward. But as she approached, the figure revealed itself to be just a stray cat, its eyes wide and reflecting the dim light like twin beacons of fear. It bolted into the night, leaving her alone with the heavy silence that followed. The moment shattered her, and the weight of isolation pressed down, amplifying her paranoia. In this world, even the smallest sounds felt like an omen. She continued, each step a reminder of the darkness that lingered just beneath her skin. A sudden crash echoed from a nearby building, and she spun around, adrenaline surging as her instinct screamed at her to run. The door swung open, and a group of WLF soldiers stumbled out, their faces masked with grim determination. Ellie's heart raced as they began searching the area, their voices a low murmur of suspicion. Hiding behind an old car, she held her breath, the air thick with tension. The realization struck her in this world. Trust was as deadly as the infected. As they drew closer, Ellie felt the encroaching dread suffocate her, memories of betrayal flooding back. The faces of her lost friends haunted her thoughts, each one a spectre of guilt that threatened to drag her down. She had been fighting for vengeance, but now that vengeance felt like a noose tightening around her neck. Suddenly, a shriek pierced the night, a sound all too familiar. The soldiers froze and Ellie's blood ran cold as clickers emerged from the shadows, drawn by the sound of life. Panic erupted as the soldiers and the infected clashed, the chaos igniting an instinctual survival response within her. She darted through the fray, every heartbeat a drum signaling her flight. But as she moved, the faces of the fallen flashed before her eyes, each one a reminder of the cost of survival. The screams of the soldiers merged with the cries of the infected, creating a symphony of despair that reverberated in her bones. The line between predator and prey blurred as Ellie fought her way through the carnage, every strike a battle against the darkness inside her. Finally escaping the melee, she stumbled into a deserted street, breathless and shaken. The rain began to pour again, washing over her like a cold embrace, but it couldn't cleanse her spirit. As she leaned against a crumbling wall, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a shattered window. The face looking back at her was unrecognizable, haunted eyes, streaked with grime and blood, a shadow of the girl she once was. In that moment, the true horror gripped her heart, the realization that she was becoming a monster, much like those she fought against. Determined to keep moving, she pressed onward into the night, but the city had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows. Each alley seemed to twist and turn, leading her deeper into the heart of her own despair. Whispers filled the air, the remnants of conversations long gone, each syllable a taunt that twisted her insides. She longed for solace, but found only the chilling reminder that hope was a fragile thing in a world consumed by chaos. As she reached the edge of a dilapidated park, the moonlight broke through the clouds, casting an eerie glow over the abandoned playground. She stood frozen, memories flooding back, laughter echoing in the air, the swing swaying gently as if inviting her to play once more. But the joy felt like a cruel illusion, replaced by the dark reality of her surroundings. In the distance, the soft moans of the infected echoed, and she knew they were drawn to the remnants of life. The past was a heavy shroud that enveloped her, and she felt the pull of the abyss, whispering promises of peace that could only be found in surrender. The fight within her raged as she faced the playground, torn between the yearning for innocence and the knowledge that she would never escape the darkness. It was then she understood survival was not just about living, it was about resisting the pull of that darkness, the constant temptation to succumb. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead, knowing that the real battle was not against the infected or the WLF, but against the despair that threatened to consume her. In this ruined world, she would fight for every shred of hope, even as the shadows closed in, a relentless reminder of the monster lurking just beneath her skin. As dawn broke over the ravaged city, Ellie found herself standing on the edge of a rooftop, the skyline silhouetted against the pastel hues of the rising sun. The world below, still shrouded in shadows, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable chaos to unfold. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of rain and decay, yet there was an undeniable beauty in the quiet moment. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs, a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness that had become her constant companion. In that stillness, Ellie reflected on her journey, the countless battles fought, the friends lost, and the darkness she had wrestled with. She thought of the faces that haunted her, the laughter of those long gone, and the weight of every choice she had made. But rather than despair, a sense of clarity washed over her. She realized that while the world may have crumbled, she was still standing, still fighting, still searching for meaning amidst the chaos. Her gaze drifted to the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the ruins. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was still light to be found. With renewed determination, Ellie tightened her grip on her knife, feeling its familiar weight steadying her resolve. She was not just a survivor, she was a beacon of hope in a world that desperately needed it. Suddenly, a distant scream pierced the silence, jolting her back to reality. Instinct kicked in as she moved swiftly, ready to confront whatever horrors lay ahead. She dashed down the fire escape, her heart racing, fueled by a fierce sense of purpose. As she navigated through the alleys, the familiar sounds of the infected and the WLF reached her ears, a chaotic symphony of survival. Arriving at the source of the screams, she found a group of survivors cornered by a horde of infected, desperation etched on their faces. Without hesitation, she lunged into the fray, her knife glinting in the sunlight as she fought alongside them. Every slash, every dodge felt like an affirmation of her will to live, her refusal to let the darkness win. The battle was fierce, the chaos swirling around her, but Ellie felt a surge of strength as she fought for these strangers. With every clicker she dispatched, she reclaimed a piece of her humanity, realizing that her journey was not just about vengeance, but also about protecting the fragile lives that still existed in this broken world. Finally, as the last of the infected fell, the survivors turned to her, their eyes wide with gratitude and awe. In that moment, Ellie understood the impact of her actions. She was not alone, she was part of something greater. They embraced her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of belonging, a flicker of hope igniting within her heart. As the sun rose higher, casting light over the destruction, Ellie knew the road ahead would still be fraught with danger and heartache. But she also understood that as long as there were people to protect, and as long as hope flickered in the shadows, she would continue to fight. In conclusion, Ellie emerged from the depths of despair, not just as a warrior forged in violence, but as a survivor committed to reclaiming her humanity. The journey had changed her irrevocably, but rather than succumb to the darkness, she chose to embrace the light. Each day became a testament to resilience, a step toward rebuilding not just her own life but the lives of those around her. The world may have been a desolate place, but in her heart, Ellie carried the flame of hope, a reminder that even in the bleakest of times, there was still a reason to fight.